I'm Ann Getsinger. I'm a painter and I live in the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts. And my studio is here, but I also work part of the year on the coast of Maine. I recently completed a series of 10 large oil paintings, which I call Panoptica.
Sunrise, afternoon, and then evening, nightfall. Don't ask always for any more interpretation.
Panoptica was an idea that was forming for years, maybe even decades. I just had this really, really simple idea of creating the light of one entire day in a circle so that the viewer would stand in the middle of this circle and would have the experience of having the change of light happen all around them. It was just a fun idea. One day, I guess, it had incubated long enough and I decided to go ahead and do that. So thinking that it was going to be just that simple, just the light of one day. But as soon as I started painting, it developed so that it didn't just have the light of one day, it had the light of 1 year, the changes in season that go through the year, and it started to transform between my two favorite places. It went from the ocean up to the Berkshire Hills and back down to the ocean. So there were a whole bunch of different cycles going on of birth and death, along with the changes in light and the changes in the time of year. Panoptica consists of 10 linen canvases, and it's actually a circle, but I'd like to start just at dawn, where this tiny toy bunny sits on this Berkshire glacial rock, and I call him the ringmaster. He's the guy who's just kind of in charge of everybody. He's small, but he knows what's going on. He's the boss. In this picture, it's just before the sun has risen. There's a hint of sunlight on one side, and down below in the shadow of the stone are actual rabbits nibbling on the earliest, newest shoots of spring. There's still a lot of winter in view, but spring is on its way. On the next panel, where you see the same rock extended, a woman sits half real and half disappearing into the clouds. And below her sits a cornucopia that may be symbols of the life that's to come, with the rising sun that's coming up at her feet. On the left-hand side, there's the decay and rot of winter, the burned bones, the dead leaves and grasses, and it all kind of stops with this burnt log pulled out of the wood stove up in Maine. There's the fiddlehead ferns, the early spring flowers, beach peas. That was partly painted in Maine, that painting. In the next panel, which I call Lilac Attack, this huge bouquet of lilac sits in a milk bucket, very much like the milk bucket that I used to take up to the dairy farm next door when I was a kid to get milk. So it has a lot of memories for me, that particular bucket. And down below on the rock are some toy soldiers who are just about to attack a totally innocent little girl in a yellow dress. And in the background, you see some cows grazing. I think I was tapping my memories of growing up next to a dairy farm and remembering how much I used to like to play in the dirt with all sorts of little cars and toys and things like that. When I was first studying realism, I used to do more typical subject matter of a still life or a landscape, kind of separated. And as I painted more and more, I started incorporating still life into landscape more and more. And I started allowing things to happen in the paintings that weren't really traditionally seen very often, and juxtaposing things that were a bit odd, and that really was appealing. Really, I found my own voice a lot better that way. It was just way more interesting. In the next panel, spring is transforming into early summer. The grasses are getting a little longer, the dandelions have developed more, and above all of this early summer growth is a sailboat, a toy sailboat, appearing to float, but in fact sitting on a vase with the artist herself in the center. And you can see the studio windows in the vase. So that's a little nod to a surreal point of view. In the background is a young man and a young woman. The man rides a horse. They're both naked, and she's playing with this same sailboat that's depicted in the foreground.
And then there's another, the boat again down here.
Yeah.
That's a pretty boat.
Summer bleeds into late summer, and the grasses of summer have grown tall and have been cut. So this picture shows the change from the tall grass down to the nubble of the cut grass. The sun is past its peak, is starting to head into the afternoon, and there's a new moon up above. The Berkshire Hills are getting lower. They're more like the foothills of the Berkshires. An army helmet sits on the ground. The ground appears to be blood-soaked beneath it. The soldiers in the lilac panel and the helmet, I think about war a lot. I think about violence a lot. I knew I wanted to put the helmet in that painting, and I started painting thinking that it would be full of roses or toys or something interesting like that. And at some point, I realized that there was nothing in the helmet, but that it was sitting on an absolutely blood-soaked earth. And so that's what I did. In the next panel, the sun is starting to set. It's also late in the summer. The grasses aren't growing anymore. And a straw hat is lifted by a breeze that has picked up. In the background, a wood fire's burning. In my mind's eye, that's Joe, who used to live up at Gustafson's apple farm next door, who would burn things in the fall. And well, he burned things year-round, but I picture him back there. And in the foreground of this painting is a leg hold trap that's now rusted shut. On the stump sits a giant fish hook, the kind used for ocean fishing. There's danger all around us, and part of it is just so integrated into our lives.
I think he was like,
Night has fallen in this panel. There's still a hint of daylight, but it's mostly night. Winter is starting to come on. It's the harvest time where things are cold at night. And in the foreground is an elk's horn and some apples, and a feather floats on the same breeze that lifted the hat in the previous panel and blows the milkweed pods apart. The Berkshire Hills are gone now, and we're getting closer to the ocean. It might be interesting to note that this is the panel I first started the series. The milkweeds were the first things I put in. Now we've gotten down to the ocean, and it's about midnight, and it's winter. It's very cold, not a lot of snow yet, but just cold. There's a pair of black boots, and I think in a way that was a nod to Andrew Wyeth, who had died not long before. He had done some beautiful paintings of some boots after his father had died. There's some debris from the ocean in the foreground, some of the beautiful rocks of Maine that I love so much, and to the right is a full moon. I put the moon itself between the two panels, this panel and the one that's coming. In this panel, you can see the full moon on the left. It's deep into night, and there's an urn. I love to paint bones and skulls and antlers and the things that are left over after we're gone, and I love the idea of things composting so that the new things can grow out of them. In the urn, you can see the reflection of my studio windows again, and it's starting to get very cold. The snow is blowing, and in the distance on the horizon is one lone sailboat, maybe the same sailboat that the young lovers are playing with. This next panel shows the deepest, darkest night, the time before you see any light at all in the sky. It also shows the transition from the ocean back to land again, and it's the dark, cold part of winter with the snow all around. In the foreground are 4 of the horses that I grew up with. Well, 3 of them are childhood toys. The red one is new, actually. He's a plastic horse I found at a tag sale. In the background, a couple of real horses run. The horse's skull sits above everything, a nod to my love of that creature. Then we return to the ringmaster who's greeting the day, and the circle continues. It's funny because all of this looks like it's fairly pleasant. A lot of the subject matter is very pleasant, but in fact it's based on my own feelings about everything, about injustice and about pain and about death and all that heavy stuff that we all think about all the time. And I think it's just, there's like an undercurrent of that all the time. Even on the most beautiful day, there's this undercurrent of danger and loss and pain with the beauty.